I thought about a topic that, as Iowans, we would all be familiar with. The first thing I thought about was putting up a picture of a clown car, but then I realized the caucuses were over. And so I decided to use corn, which I was known for, as a basis for a couple of different points that I want to make. If you look up there, it's the statistics for corn production in the United States. The average bushels per acre in 1909 was 28 bushels per acre. 1959, 51 bushels per acre. In 2013, the average across the nation was 153 bushels per acre. It's an amazing amount of improvement in a little bit more than a century. That happened because a lot of hard work, a lot of physical labor, a lot of thought power, a lot of engineering. So if you think about farming, it's hybrid seed, fertilizer, pesticides, different kinds of equipment that is being used, as opposed to, the first part of this, it would have been horse and oxen. So it's a whole different world. And so you can think about those physical things, or you can think about what really is behind it, and it's an attitude of being accepting of change. Because if farmers did things the same way that they did in 1909, the result would be they'd get the same product. They'd get 28 bushels per acre. But they don't. They have tried things, found some things that worked and probably a lot that didn't. But they never went backwards. They never went back to the way it was. They always continued to build on the progress that they had. So in the field of education, I recently heard an estimate that there are 3.5 million studies on how to improve education. There's a lot of knowledge out there of how to improve education. But how do we do it implementing it? And in my experience, we do a lot of implementation of a good idea, and when it doesn't work, we go back to the way it was. And then we try another one. And when it's not immediately successful, we go back to the way it was. And so we have a long history of fairly stagnant student achievement. I think we're on the verge right now of doing some things differently, of really breaking out of that idea of always going back to the same model. And so I really believe you're going to hear some of those examples this evening. So if it's implementing 3.5 million ideas, there's a lot of knowledge there, then what does it really take to have it end up being successful? And so I'll change the pictures the same, but now if you look at those statistics, this is for Jackson County. In 2011, the average bushels per acre of corn was 178. In 2012, it went down to 115. Last year, by the way, is the highest it's ever been, 191 bushels per acre. Good year last year. What happened in 2012? Why had advances made it all the way to 178, but in 2012 it was 115? Now, I wasn't studying corn production in 2012, so I can't really say, but I'll give it a pretty good guess. The climate must have been different in that year. 115 bushels per acre wouldn't have been what anybody would have expected unless it was too wet or too dry or whatever other kinds of weather issues caused the climate to be different. And that's really what I want to talk to you the most about this evening. The climate is something that I don't know that it's been studied in the same way that actual changes of instruction have been studied. There's a lot of change theory out there for adults. There's a lot of change theory out there for organizations and companies. We actually use one of those in our AEA. So if you look up there, those are the 6 secrets of change. An author, educational expert, Michael Fullen, does great school improvement work around the entire globe, is really known for some work in California, some work in Canada. He wrote a book in 2008, The 6 Secrets of Change. If you look at that, it's all pointing towards adults. And what I would want you to think about is if we're going to improve education, it's more than just changing pedagogy, changing what teachers do, what's expected of students. It really needs just as much focus on changing the climate and the culture as that corn plant needs a different climate to succeed. So if you think about extrapolating a little bit from Fullen's work to what does that mean for kids? What does it mean for teachers? What does it mean for schools? You know, and I think the first one's pretty easy. You know, as an organization, if you love your employees, you do things to help them, they're likely to be better employees. So if you just substitute the word students, if we love our students, it's going to be a better result. We're going to have more success. And as you study any educational entity, you will find people that every kid knows loves them. And you'll also find people that kids avoid. The saying is that you never forget how someone makes you feel. And kids are the masters of that. So that idea of loving students is number one in the climate. And I think as adults we have to remember it's not to love the kids that are good. It's not to love the kids that are smart. It's not to love the kids who are active. It's to love students, every one of them. Every single student has potential. And until that becomes something that is ingrained in our systems, I don't think we'll make the kind of progress in our field that is present in other places. The next one, connecting peers with purpose. You don't even have to change a word there. Connecting students to learn things together is the way that it happens in a deep, meaningful way. The idea of having a student sit down at a desk, work independently, never talk to anyone else, turn your work in, make sure it's all yours, don't ever collaborate or consult with anybody else. That's not the way the world works, and that's not the way that it's good for students. Organizations, schools, we're saying to our adults, our teachers, connect peers with purpose. Have our teachers work together. The same thing works for students. Capacity building prevails. I mean, finding ways to find what students are good at and build capacity to make them even better. Finding where their passions are and build capacity is going to work a lot better than trying to beat somebody into doing something that they're not as passionate about. Learning is the work, and this one is one I'm really passionate about. I think there are many times that education has turned into a game. Students know how to play the game. Sometimes teachers play the game. And it's about grades, and it's about credits, and it's about a multitude of other things, but it's not always about learning. So in the intro, you heard a passion of mine is competency based education. The idea that it's not really that you just sit in a chair for an hour and get credit for the class. It doesn't make any difference unless you can show that you learned something. The teacher knows that the student learned something. There's a way to have the student demonstrate that they've learned something. Learning is the work. Going to class isn't the work. Paying attention and not making any noise and sitting quietly in your seat is not the work. Learning is the work. And whatever it takes to make that happen is what we as adults in education should be willing to make happen. The next one's transparency rules. In an organization, it's really important for transparency to be there so that people know what's going on organizationally. Well, it's the same thing with students in a classroom. Transparency of why are we learning this should not be because I said so or because it's in the book. Transparency should be you as a student need to learn this because, with a definite solid answer. If there's not a good reason to learn it, maybe the kid's right in asking, why are we doing this? So it should be very transparent. And then the last one takes us full circle. Systems learn means that you work on something and you learn from it and you get better. You don't do something, find some fault in it, and go backwards. Do something, find some fault, and go backwards. It's do something, learn from it, get better, and move forward. Learn from that, move forward again. That's how we will make education be better. One of the really amazing things that I've just heard in the last week is that in 2020, there will be 3 million jobs in the STEM field that will not be filled because there are not quality applicants. Now, if you're a senior this year, as I look at some of the students, you should know that the average starting salary for a job in the STEM field is the highest of really any job out there. The 3 million jobs that will be available will have an average starting salary around $75,000 a year with an average salary 10 years in of $112,000 a year. And those jobs will not be filled. 3 million of them. That's amazing. The best jobs. The jobs that as parents, you would always want your son or daughter to end up in one of those kinds of positions, as long as they're passionate about it. But why are they unfilled? They're unfilled because there is a serious breakdown in us preparing students for those jobs, to be passionate about it, to love it. If you take a group of young elementary students and you let them explore, you let them experiment, science will be their favorite thing they do all day. But by the time you get to high school, science is a class that many kids are running away from. Math is a subject the world runs on mathematics. And many students, by the time they're in high school, will run away from a math class. And those are two fields that there's a drastic shortage of students majoring when they get to college. That's how that shortage happens. Well, think about how those two subjects are taught. Probably the two most traditional classes. The 1909 example that I gave you about production in corn farming, that's probably, in most cases, those are the classes that are taught the same way they've been taught forever, more than any others. Now, I know there's exceptions. There are great teachers in every school, and there are people that choose to do business differently and make it real and make it happen for students. But if you looked at it over the course of all schools everywhere, those are the most traditional. That's an indication right there. When you do it the way it's always been done, you have students that in the end are running away from things that they should be passionate about. And as a result, there are opportunities for students that are being lost. Math has always been a class historically that has selected and sorted kids. That some kids that are good at math move on to advanced math. Some students who, in the amount of time they've had to study it, didn't get it as quickly, move to a different path. The days of us being able to do that as a nation, to select and sort students, is long gone. It's long gone. Our economy needs to have those 3 million jobs filled. And until we, as educators, create a climate in every classroom and implement new ideas, it's going to be hard for us to make the progress that we should. Education needs to make some gains that are much more similar to farming than what we have in the past. Thank you.